Many of you in the audience are like me and agree that this, quote, hostile takeover of the Democratic Party has objectively failed by any metric you want to look at. And I try to emphasize this point. I was never one of those people who was always against the takeover of the Democratic Party. In fact, I thought for a while, for years, I thought that was objectively the best path forward, especially with the Bernie Sanders campaign and the opportunity that presented, where somebody who supports left policies like Medicare for All, living wage, and radical climate action, and ending the wars. That opportunity to have somebody like that become the head of the Democratic Party, become the president of the United States, and then fill government with people who are like-minded in ideology and policy, that opportunity felt like the best chance to get left policies in this country, policies that would radically improve the lives of millions of people in the middle class, working class, poor people in this country. So I was all on board with that strategy. But unlike many people, the most prominent people in new media and other lefties, I'm willing to take in new information and let that shape my opinion. But if you mean to tell me that in 2 presidential primaries in a row, the Democratic establishment will, the first time, they just outright cheated and like did everything in their power to undermine Bernie Sanders. It was proven in their own words, in their own emails. The Hillary Clinton campaign had an agreement with the DNC, who's technically supposed to be the ref in the primary. They're supposed to be neutral and making sure all sides just, following the rules of the primary and things like that. They had an agreement where basically Hillary Clinton campaign was running the DNC. The chair of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2008, a close Clinton ally. So they rigged it as much as they can, threw people off of voter rolls. They were leaking her debate questions before debates. They had coordinated with the media to smear Bernie Sanders and prop up Hillary Clinton, as they did everything in their power to cheat the left and to cheat Bernie Sanders. And then they turn around, do it again in the very next primary. Okay, so then you're telling, and then all the while they get away with this with absolutely no consequences, no repercussions. Bernie Sanders won't even call them out for the cheating that they're doing. So they get to openly cheat the left in primaries, and there's no price to pay. And at the end of the day, whether they win, they win, or if they lose, they win. So, okay, stop telling me that I need to get involved in Democratic primaries, because at the end of the day, it's ultimately decided. So on the presidential level, I need to get involved in Democratic primaries, because at the end of the day, it's ultimately decided. So on the presidential level, you can't tell me that taking over the Democratic Party is the best strategy to get a lefty elected president. And then the whole takeover of Congress. Okay, we tried the Justice Democrats, right? We tried to elect a bunch of lefties running on left policies, left platform, who refused to take corporate money, right? With the Justice Democrats, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman, all of them. When they get to Congress, what did they do? Immediately sell out and become part of the Democratic establishment and loyal partisan hacks for Team Democrat. And they never step out of line, and they never challenge them on policy, and they never have any public knockdown, drag-out fights with Democratic leadership to do this, quote, hostile takeover of the party like they promised. So just electing them, it kind of disproved the notion that, oh, eventually we'll get enough people and then they'll vote the way we need them to vote to pass left policies, because as soon as they get there, they're already just trying to cozy up and be on the good side of the Democratic establishment. And then that culminated all throughout the last year, voting for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House. After she presided twice, but the second time after she presided over the worst government handling to emergency in U.S. history. She was Speaker of the House during the entire COVID crisis, during the economic crisis. And what did she do? Did she provide healthcare to the American public? Did she pass single payer through the House? No, she didn't. Did she pass UBI to deal with the 60 million people unemployed and the 60% of small businesses that closed permanently? Did she do anything to address that? Did she do anything to address the 40 million people who were about to be evicted? No, she didn't. So she objectively handled the crisis this emergency worse than any other emergency has been handled by a Speaker of the House. And then, of course, ideologically opposed to all the right policies that are solutions to the crisis. Still, the Justice Democrats had the numbers to force her out. They didn't. They voted for her anyway. Didn't even put up anybody to run against her. Didn't even make any demands like the force the vote movement was asking for, like demanding a floor vote on Medicare for all in the middle of a pandemic and the worst economic crisis in history. They didn't do any of that. They voted for a neoliberal, corporatist shill, believer in austerity economics, voted for that person to continue to preside over the Speaker of the House in the middle of an emergency. Okay, so this is what this quote, hostile takeover of the Democratic Party, these are the fruits that it bears. It's absolutely useless. Going along with the CARES Act, going along with every single shitty, inadequate stimulus bill that's been passed since, and never once holding the bills up, never once refusing to vote for it, never once using their power, using their people power, using the grassroots movement of tens of millions of people in this country, working class people in this country, that got them elected and put them in positions of power. Never once using that to make actual real demands to improve the stimulus bills and put necessary policies that are solutions to the problem. Never once did any of that, right? And then, of course, like I said, with the force the vote moment. So with all of that, it goes to show you that, one, once you elect them, they're just going to be partisan hacks and just be part of the Democratic machine. And they'll be virtually indistinguishable from the rest of the Democrats other than their tweets where they say, oh, is Medicare for all nice? Isn't single payer nice? And then on top of that, with the force to vote, it showed that even when they do have the votes, even when they do have the votes to make the demands, the policy demands that we need and that we sent them to fight for, even when they have the votes to do it, they'll find some reason to not do it. So you say you keep doing this strategy, you keep electing these Democrats. At some point, they're going to have this magical number, unspecified number, undefined number of uncorrupted politicians who don't take corporate money. They're going to have that magical number in Congress. And whether it's they have the majority by 10 votes or 5 votes, 20 votes, whatever it is, and it takes however many election cycles, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when they finally get that number, right, and they get the White House, you mean to tell me that they won't pull the same shit that the Democrats do and find some reason, some excuse to not follow through, to not do what they ran on, just like with the force to vote moment, which it proved that they will. It proved that even when they have the numbers, they'll find some reason to not fight for the policies. So what on earth why do you believe that this is the way that this is the only path forward to get left policies? And this video is, yes, it's about third parties and how objectively, in terms of electoral politics, that is the best option. But personally, as I've stated many times on the show, in the immediate, right now, to deal with the emergency, to deal with the tens of thousands of people dying because they can't afford healthcare, to deal with the millions of people who will inevitably die because they can't afford healthcare. They can't afford their insulin. They can't afford their drug treatment. They can't afford cancer treatment. They can't afford the surgery that they need. The immediate solution to deal with that, the immediate solution to deal with the widespread permanent unemployment and economic devastation in this country is policies like single payer, policies like UBI. And we don't have time to wait 20 years, 25 years, 30 years from now to maybe have enough elected progressives in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House to actually fight for these policies. That is that idea is completely divorced from reality. And just the whole idea of electoral politics in general, just not only the takeover of the Democratic Party, but just the idea that the only way to get these policies is through electoral politics is just divorced from reality. Even if you believe the best way for the left to go is a separate third party, that's still not going to get people UBI in this emergency. That's still not going to get single payer in this emergency. That's still not going to do anything for the 40 million people who are going to be evicted in this emergency. So in order to get those policies to address those immediate crises, we need, the only option left is public pressure and public pressure campaigns, direct action, strikes, organized, targeted protests outside of politicians' homes and offices, relentlessly shaming every single elected official in Congress, in DC right now, pressuring them to do the policies that people need right now. Those are the only options we have left, similar to the civil rights movement in the 60s. They weren't trying to elect politicians enough anti-segregationists. They weren't trying to elect enough civil rights activists to then change the system on the inside. No, they realized all they have is public pressure, public demonstrations, and the power to shame these politicians into the correct position through the media and other means. That's what Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Black Panthers, and all these other civil rights leaders, that was their theory of change. And then ultimately, of course, they didn't get everything they wanted, but they made huge advancements in their movement by doing those public pressure campaigns. So in this moment, I think we need to adopt that framework, and instead of trying to pass the civil rights bill, or instead of trying to pass the Civil Rights Act, we do that with Medicare for All. We do that with UBI. We do that with these economic policies to address the emergency in this country. So my focus right now, and the focus, I think the focus of the left should be on direct action above everything at this moment. But there's also then a conversation to be had about electoral politics eventually, because yes, public pressure, it will work to get the big picture policies that we need right now to work to solve the immediate crises. Yes, I believe that would work, but it is not feasible to every single time we expect the government to do something to have tens of millions of people out in the street. It's just not practical. So yes, for the big things, public pressure, great idea. But also, you just need to have people in government working on behalf of the people. And that's not going to happen in any of the two parties. That's not going to happen with any of the two parties controlling government. The only way that happens is if you have people separated from the duopoly, separated from the establishment, and strictly, objectively, and clearly antagonistic to the establishment in both parties, the political establishment and the economic establishment, the corporate establishment. Just objectively antagonistic and hostile and openly confrontational to the centers of power in this country. That's the best way to have politicians in government actually working on behalf of people. And yes, I understand that there are obstacles in the way and things like that, but that is, to me, it just seems like the only path. We've exhausted every other option. Taking over the Democratic Party, it's not going to happen for us. It's not going to work. And so it's just bizarre to me how prominent people in left new media, it's like they're incapable of processing the new information and reacting and updating their thinking to actually meet the moment and meet what's actually happening on the ground in the country. They are stuck in this mindset. They've thought about it. They've and committed themselves to this strategy years ago, and now it's become like this strategy of taking over the Democratic Party, and now it's become like a religion. It's a non-falsifiable claim. No matter what evidence you present them, no matter how many times you try to show them that it's not working, they refuse to address the merits of those arguments And it's just like water off a duck's back. They've come to the conclusion that taking over the Democratic Party is the way to go. And there's nothing that could convince them that that objectively isn't working. And so that leads me to the topic of this video. Kulinski did a segment on his channel a couple weeks ago, a week ago, I don't remember. But I saw it a while ago. And it was annoying because he admits that a third party is more popular than it's ever been in U.S. history. But yet, instead of taking that and then also taking into consideration the fact that every single elected official in this country has objectively failed to meet this moment in an unexcusable way, and honestly, what should be a disqualifying way, none of them should ever be in public office again. Anybody who was elected and presided and oversaw the handling of COVID and the economic crisis, none of them should be in public office again. So instead of adding that up with the fact that third parties are more popular than ever, adding that up to the fact that we're seeing what it looks like with Democrats in complete control of government, and they're doing absolutely nothing. They are no different than the Republicans. They're still doing illegal offensive wars around the world, military intervention around the world, imperialism. They're still doing austerity, harmful, destructive austerity, imposing that on the people in the time of crisis. They still refuse to provide people health care. So in all the ways that it matters, they're governing no different than the Republicans. And we're seeing, this is the perfect case study of what it looks like when Democrats control the House, Senate, and the White House. And we have the added benefit of seeing what these elected progressives would do, because now they have the power to obstruct the neoliberal agenda. They have the power to obstruct the austerity agenda. And they still won't do it. They're still going along with it. They're still loyal partisan hacks to the Democratic Party. So you see all of that. And again, add it all up to the fact that third parties are more popular than ever. And still, it's like he won't even acknowledge the seismic shift in the political landscape that's happened since COVID. And he's like, oh, well, that number's nice, but still can't happen because something systemic problems and it's rigged against third parties. So, oh, it's not even worth trying because it's not going to happen. So, I have his commentary on that. I'm going to show you the clip and I'm going to break it down. But first, you guys already know the deal. If you're able to contribute to the show financially, I have the links to Patreon and the About page of the YouTube channel. You could sign up and do monthly subscriptions. I have different levels, $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, and I don't post Patreon exclusive content because I feel like everybody should have access to this content, whether or not you can afford to pay for it. So it's just a way for you to help support the show on like a monthly basis, so you don't even have to think about it. You just sign up for whatever you feel comfortable with, and it just happens automatically. I also have a link to PayPal if you feel more comfortable doing a one-time contribution. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the people who have contributed, who have helped me out and helped support the show over the last few months. You guys help me do what I love, and the same for all the people who can't do support financially, but you guys show up and watch all the videos. You share the content. You guys leave all those great comments, and yes, I do read all the comments. So any way you guys can help support the show, I greatly appreciate it, because if it wasn't for you all, couldn't have made it to where we are now with over 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I'm going to show you the clip, and then we'll come back and break it down.
So Gallup did a new poll, and this is fascinating. Support for a third party in the U.S. just hit a record high point. It's a record. So 62% of the country says a third party is needed. That's up from 57% in September. That's already incredibly high, but now it's 62%. This is the highest support for a third party by 1 percentage point, and a record high 63% of Republicans favor a third party. Now, beyond that, I do want to say, because it is true, like, I love the idea of having a multi-party system, but in order to do that, we need to change the structure of the entire system, and nobody should lie to themselves on that point. You know what I mean? Unless and until we actually change the structure of the system, it's just self-disenfranchisement and a waste of time. Now, in an ideal world, would I change the system? Absolutely. Like I said, I want to have a multi-party system, but we don't have that system. So my approach to this has always been, I'm not going to actively, if there's third-party attempts on the left, and there is, I mean, the Green Party is usually on the ballot in 46 to 48 states. I'm not going to badmouth them, put them down, voter shame people, because I want to see some sort of success come from that. I really don't think it's ever going to happen, but I want to see it. And so since I want to see it, my general approach to all this stuff is what I call an all-the-above approach. And I asked Noam Chomsky about this, and he actually said the exact same thing, and that made me happy. He was like, I just think we should throw everything at the wall and put all of our effort into a variety of avenues, and that's going to lead to our best, chance of success in the long term. And so, I mean, that's what my instinct says. My instinct says the same thing. That in the long term, yeah, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so you don't put all your eggs in the taking over the Democratic Party basket, which I think is the way that is really the only structural way you can succeed at this point in time. But I'm not going to actively oppose people for trying the third party path, because as long as I think your heart's in the right place, then you have my support. And a lot of the people who are trying to get some sort of third party, their heart's in the right place, again, I don't think it's going to work, but it doesn't really matter. If there's any chance it helps even a little bit, fine. Then do it and I'll support you. But there also is, I should say this as well, it's not going to be what people think, which is like a third party will get so viable on the left that then the Democrats will have to take them seriously and form a coalition, and they'll start listening to the concerns of this third party. It's not going to happen because we already saw the dynamic. Look at 2016. The Green Party got, 2% of the vote? Something incredibly small. And it's not like the Democrats said, well, now we must work with them because we needed their votes to win. It was the opposite. They started shitting on them more and blaming them for the loss. And so I think they'll just keep shitting on them and blaming them for the loss. And we have to look forward to forever. Like, that's how it's going to unfold. But again, we need to exhaust every avenue to try to win. So if people go down this path, by all means. And listen, on paper, like in theory, it is the approach because 62% of the country wants it. It just so happens that the system is beyond rigged against it, that they make it fucking impossible unless you do structural reform. You know what I mean? So, but since everybody's heart is on this page, including mine, like my heart is on this page, that like fresh start idea, you should exhaust it and see what happens. And hopefully there's some upside that comes out of it that I haven't, been able to determine or break down yet.
All right, so the first point he makes about it being to support a third party, it's because the system is so rigged against it, it's self-disenfranchisement and it's a waste of time. That's the way he puts it. But okay, let's get into details, because I feel like a big problem on left new media is people just say shit and they don't ever feel like they need to explain it. And they just say these things as if it's fact, and then it gets repeated as if it's fact, but it's based off of some really shitty logic that, nobody's had to explain. So let's get into detail. Yes, we understand that the system's rigged against a third party and against affecting change that way through electing enough people in the third party. Can you explain to me how that's more rigged than the Democratic Party trying to take over the Democratic Party? Because on its face, again, we've been in over and over ad nauseum all the different ways that taking over the Democratic Party has failed, is a failure, and it just is not going to happen in our lifetime. People have been trying this for 30 years, 40 years, and look where we are, as neoliberal, as pro-austerity, as pro-war as the Democratic Party has ever been. So what exactly is the calculation that you're making that it's easier to take over the Democratic Party and get lefties elected that way than it is, and lefties elected that way, and to keep them true to their principles and their policies? What proof are you having that's easier? Because first of all, you are operating in a party that is openly hostile to your existence. The Democratic Party, yes, in general, the electoral system is rigged against third parties in certain ways, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But it's also rigged against lefties trying to take over the Democratic Party. You have giant institutional obstacles to taking over the left party. The lefties taking over the Democratic Party. You have the media apparatus. First of all, they'll ignore the shit out of you until you get popular enough to where they can't ignore you. And there's very few of them actually break through to that level. But then once they do get to actually covering you, they're just going to smear you relentlessly. And then the Democratic leadership is going to smear you relentlessly. And then furthermore, just the whole, yes, it's rigged against third parties, but it's rigged against lefties. And then it's an extra layer rigged against lefties because now you're operating in the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party gets to set the rules for how their elections go, how their primaries go, and how all the competition goes between the establishment and the lefties running in the Democratic Party. So if it's rigged against third parties outside of the Democratic Party, it's doubly rigged against people trying to run against the Democratic Party because, like what was proven in 2016, the ref is working against you. The other team is working against you. So there is no fair game there. At no point is it a fair game in the Democratic Party. Is it a fair shot? And, it's a meritocracy, may the best among us win. That's not what it is. They will actively undermine you while you're running in their own party. And they'll be able to change the rules like they've done, like Cherry Bustos did in the previous primary, where she said anybody who is primarying an incumbent Democrat, we will, if you work with contractors for whatever it is, whatever services they provide to your campaign, those contractors will be blacklisted and will no longer be allowed to work for the Democratic Party at all, ever again. So they will just completely change rules like that just to undermine you. And then there is no recourse there. There is no legislative process. It's just literally they can decide to change the rules mid-game because they're the ones who write the rules. And it's not like, if they want to try to rig it even more against third parties, they'd actually have to pass a law. And that would actually require more effort. But in the Democratic Party, they will, like I said, they will literally just make up rules to make it even harder for you to win. And there's no recourse there because you're running in their party and they have complete control over it. And then, of course, all right, so let's get into how it's more rigged against the third party, or how it is rigged against the third party. They make it harder for you because in order to get on the ballot, you need thousands of signatures. If you're running as a Democrat, you don't. You just fill in the paperwork, fill in the application, and just like that, if you do the process, you're allowed to run as a Democratic candidate in the Democratic primary. But to get ballot access as a third party or as an independent, you need to get signatures. So yes, in that way, it is harder to run as a third party. But are you telling me that is such an impossible, insurmountable obstacle that we can never, ever, ever try it, even in a moment like this when both parties have failed, objectively failed to meet the moment, and everybody in the country sees it, and we're in the middle of a unprecedented transformational period with a pandemic and an economic crisis, and everything has been flipped on its head, and the entire political landscape we're in uncharted territory. So you mean to tell me, with a moment like that, with momentum for people outside of the two-party system, you can't tell you it's the idea that you have to get 1,000 votes here, or 1,000 signatures here, or 10,000 signatures there to run is such an insurmountable obstacle. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. The power of lefties in new media and this grassroots organization shows me that is a very easy obstacle to overcome. And in fact, the Green Party does it all the time. And they get on the ballots in all 50 states. So it's not an impossible thing to do. It just requires work. And if you have the entire apparatus of left new media organizing the left to say, hey, this is what we need to do. Let's get these signatures, everybody. it's not, I don't think it's going to be impossible to get 10,000 signatures. Like, I think in Florida, it's like 10,000 signatures for a third party to get ballot access. And it ranges between states, but it's anywhere between 1,000 signatures to 10,000 signatures. That's not impossible. So again, people just say these things and they don't have to explain it, hash out exactly what it is that's so insurmountable that we just could never ever try the third party option, no matter how bad taking over the Democratic Party has failed. And then another thing, okay, the debates, they would say the debates, oh, you can't get into the debates. Here's the thing. We've seen Democrats, incumbents, completely ignore progressive challengers and refuse to debate them during the entire primary. Okay? So you still have to you have to work your way around that. Just because you're in the Democratic Party, you're not obligated to debate the incumbent. They'll just refuse to debate you too. Nancy Pelosi did it. Many other Democrats do it. So then you have that. And so Kyle tries to take this, what he believes to be this high-minded, completely the most reasonable man on earth approach to this. And he says, hey man, I'm gonna be a good guy here. Of course I want to see a third party, but you know, I don't think it's the best option. So I'm not going to badmouth the third parties. I'm not going to actively work against them. And I'm not going to vote shame people who vote third party. And because of that, you can't say I'm an obstacle. So I'm really doing good here, aren't I? Even though I'm telling people to go vote for the Democratic Party no matter what. And then he says, oh, I'm in favor of all the above approach. And it sounds nice. That sounds reasonable. Oh, he's not really against the third parties. He's saying try it and he will go another way. Here's the problem with that. The experiment is over. We tried that way. It's objectively failed, produced no results. And in fact, the people who've tried to take over the Democratic Party in the exact way that you are suggesting, they've all, not half of them, not 75% of them, they've all gotten to the Democratic Party. They've all got elected and become regular ass establishment Democrats who vote for obscene corporate bailouts, vote for neoliberals like Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House, and then refuse to use their leverage to ever make any demands for left policy. That is objectively the case. So you may think it's there's no harm, no foul if you're just not actively shitting on a third party. But there actually is. Because you're telling people, no matter what, go to the Democratic Party. No matter how much they fuck you over, you have to go to the Democratic Party. And in this moment, in this time of crisis, where we need to actually be putting pressure on these politicians and completely change the way we go about politics, to do that, you are literally defending the status quo. You're saying, hey, we know the Democrats aren't going to do anything. We know they ain't going to change, but keep voting for them anyway. That's the status quo. So if you're advocating for the status quo in a time when we need something, a radical departure from the status quo, that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. And especially for somebody as prominent a figure on the left and left new media as Kyle Kulinski and many other people, left new media hosts who are in the same, take the same approach. You all have the biggest platforms of anybody on the left. If anybody can get the left organized and on the correct plan, correct path of direct actions and third parties, that would be the most prominent people with the biggest audiences. Kyle Kulinski almost has 1 million subscribers on YouTube alone. So, and it's funny because these are the same people who talk about how the left's so disorganized, the left can't agree on anything and things like that. But then you're going to advocate for this, quote, all the above approach, which is just literally splitting us up in different directions. And ultimately what ends up happening when you do that is we become less effective because it isn't, there is no solidarity. There is no organized movement making clear demands and having a clear direction. You have giant factions saying, yeah, Democratic Party's bad, but stay with them. And then the other part saying we have to go third party, and another part saying we have to go direct action. If we are it sounds good. It sounds like the most reasonable man on earth approach to say, do everything you can, throw all the shit against the wall, see what sticks. But that doesn't work when the resources and the organization capability of the left is as limited as it is. And there are as few left activists as we have. If that's the case, we need to try to focus it on the best strategy. And again, taking over the Democratic Party is objectively a failure, and it isn't going to get us the policies we need to address this emergency. So all the energy that's being directed towards that, as if that's going to solve problems, all that energy being directed towards raising money, fundraising, volunteering, and doing propaganda to get Democratic politicians like Nina Turner elected, as if that's going to get us Medicare for all that is redirecting the energy from productive avenues to get actual results into this failed strategy that has produced no results. And so I'll end on this note. If not now, then when? If you can't take the opportunity that's been presented to us, where both parties have objectively failed beyond any sort of excusing or justifying. They've objectively failed in the worst emergency in U.S. history. They failed to do their most basic function of their job. In fact, worse than just failing, they've compounded the issues and made it worse and contributed to the economic crisis by, instead of bailing out the people, bailing out corporations and using all of this crisis in this country as a smokescreen to help the rich run out the back door with all the money. That's what both parties did. Every single politician in both parties decided that that was the approach that the government was going to take. That is inexcusable, and that has led to the economic destruction and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in this country, unnecessarily. If you can't take that momentum for a third party, and you can't take the AOC and the Justice Democrats clearly selling out at 1,000,000 miles per hour, if you can't, Bernie Sanders, the best among them, now talking about he isn't even fighting for Medicare for all. When he was asked about what he's going to do for healthcare, he's going to do what Joe Biden wants. Joe Biden, who said he'll veto Medicare for all. Joe Biden, who's in the pocket of the for-profit health insurance industry and Big Pharma. Bernie Sanders, again, the best among these elected politicians, the elected Democrats. Even he selling out at 1,000,000 miles per hour and just is a loyal, willing tool of the establishment. If you can't take all of this failure that's out in the open, and the contempt that people have for the entire establishment of both parties, if you can't take that, and the huge popular support for a third party in this moment, and for and you can't take the incredibly popular policy positions of single payer, which has over majority support in the Democratic Party, Republican Party, and among independents. If you can't take UBI, that has overwhelming majority support among Democrats, Republicans, and independents. If you can't take all of those things that are objectively beneficial, that give the third party best path of becoming viable than we've ever seen in our lifetime. If even now you're still saying, nope, it's impossible, I won't lift a finger to make it happen, I'm still going to tell everybody to vote for Democrats, and that's the only way to go about it. So then you'll never, ever leave the Democratic Party. You might as well say, wear a sign around your neck, tattoo it on your forehead. No matter, Democrats could be as bad as they want. They could run, Donald Trump could run as a Democrat next time. He could run as a Democrat and govern, they'll govern exactly like Republicans as they're doing right now with the Democrats controlling the House, Senate, and the White House. Be as hostile to the working class as they are, leaving people for dead in the middle of an economic crisis, still proposing austerity for the working class and the poor after they gave blank checks to corporations and the richest people in the country. Even when they're doing all of that, even though when they refuse to provide health care in the middle of the worst public health emergency of our lifetime, and it's led to the deaths of almost 1 million people now, and you still say, what can we do? We have to vote for the Democrats. That is literally saying status quo is the best way we got. That's the best path forward. Incrementalism and crossing our fingers and hoping the Democrats see the light, that's our best path forward. So you're saying you'll just be a loyal Democrat no matter what. And that is such an embarrassing thing to say, especially when we're seeing them fail to meet this moment. And they have no excuses. They can have complete control of the House, Senate, and the White House. They can do anything that they want, and they still aren't helping people. And you're still going to say, that's our only path forward electorally? That makes absolutely no sense. And I wish people would engage in this argument instead of just relying on the shitty arguments that they've made from 4 years ago and not factoring in all the things that have changed, how the political landscape has changed in such a drastic way. I just wish they would actually engage with the facts on the ground and what's actually happening in this moment and the mood of this country and the political climate of this country in this moment, in this emergency, and actually try to sit down and come up and decide what's the best path forward instead of just this dogmatic, really fundamentalist approach that they've made up their minds, and nothing, literally nothing on earth that can happen is going to make you say, you know what, I think we need to reevaluate. We need to come up with a new approach because this isn't working. I just really wish that they would address these arguments instead of just dismissing all the people on the left who are advocating for these positions, just dismissing them out of hand as if we're unserious and we haven't thought about this and we're just wasting our time. I really wish they would engage in these arguments.